The young men in these photographs volunteered to serve as soldiers at the beginning of the First World War. They left their factories, offices and farms to fight in the battles of the Somme and Passchendaele. Remarkably, they survived and have lived to be more than 100 years old. Some of their stories have not been told for over 80 years. This is their account of an event in British history now almost beyond living memory. They are the last survivors of the Great War, the veterans.
I went along this road and a shell came along, and my goodness, it got louder and louder and louder, and I thought, my God, it's got my name on it.
One of the great big shells blew all the earth and the dirt straight on top of us. I couldn't move. I was terribly quickly breathing, gasping as it were, trying to get air in, of course. And it was only the fact that I'd got my steel hat on that saved my life.
Yeah, you take that bit of luck with you, else it's no damn good. Luck and sense. No good saying, oh, I'm a British soldier, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. You have to use your damn brains.
At 11 a.m. on a bank holiday Monday on the 4th of August 1914, Britons received the news that they were at war with Germany, a country with a vast army of trained reserves and conscripts. In contrast, Britain had only a small professional army, despite the size of its empire. As the British Expeditionary Force was rapidly dispatched to Belgium to meet the advancing enemy, the Secretary of State for War, Lord Kitchener, mounted a campaign throughout Britain to recruit 1 million volunteers. Amongst the first to volunteer in September 1914 was Dick Barron, a junior travel agent with Thomas Cook in London. He is now 103.
You can't imagine the war fever in those days. The patriotic war fever. I mean, we were at school told the thin red line. The soldiers were very, very spectacular creatures. And how they fought in the Crimea and the wonderful charge of the Light Brigade. It was all very romantic.
Robbie Burns grew up in the Scottish village of Gourock and was a 19-year-old clerk working in Glasgow. He is now 102.
Everywhere you went in Glasgow, the great big posters up of Kitchener with his finger pointing at you. No matter where you were, this finger seemed to be pointing at you. Your king and country need you. However, I worked in an insurance office, and I went to the window. I could see probably 200 or 300 men, and the pipes always seemed to do something to rouse my enthusiasm. I thought to myself, well, I want to do something like this.
More than 500,000 men were recruited in the September and October of 1914. Another was Jack Rogers, an apprentice shoemaker in his father's business in Hammersmith. He is now 104.
I was keen to go. I thought I'd like to be a soldier, you know, and do a bit of shooting. I always fancied being a rifleman, that was the point. And when I went up to Shepherd's Bush, which was the recruiting depot, they gave me then the choice of 3 different regiments I could have been in. The third one was the old Sherwood Foresters, 7th Battalion, and they were called the Robin Hood Rifles. So I fancied that. I thought I'd like to be a Robin Hood rifle.
To enlist, volunteers had to be aged between 19 and 38. But such was the determination of younger boys to join up. Many lied about their age. Most recruiting officers turned a blind eye if the boys were strong and healthy. George Louth, a worker with the Portsmouth Gas and Coke Company, had lied about his age to get into the 15th Hampshire Regiment.
A colonel come round to visit us, to size us up, more or less, to see what they got. And he came round and asked questions. He said, and he asked each one how old they were and such like. So he came to me and asked me how old I was. I said, 19, sir. He said, 19? Yes, sir. Right. He went to the next man. He spoke to him. He come back to me again. He said, how old did you say you were? I said, 19, sir. And he looked at me straight. Now, I was only 18. I put my age on. And he walked away. And from then on, it was all go.
The raw recruits had to be rapidly turned into soldiers ready for battle. They would be trained at hundreds of makeshift army camps that sprung up all over Britain.
You had to learn how to use a gun. You used to go on musketry courses. And so I got to be, as it happened, quite a good shot. And I became eventually what they called a marksman. And so for which I got an extra £6 a day on my wages.
The cavalry was the army's elite attacking force, and its training methods were renowned for their toughness and precision. Many thousands of grooms and delivery boys who worked with horses enlisted, but they still had much to learn to make the grade. Smiler Marshall, a former groom in Wivenhoe, was just 17 when he joined the Essex Yeomanry. He is now 101.
When we went to the 20th Hussars at Colchester, you have to ride all different horses, nothing on them, no saddle, no bridle, no nothing. You have to have a stick and a little cane under each arm, and then when the riding masters cracked the whip, he didn't say anything. He just cracked the whip, and the horses, all the horses that you were on, stopped dead. And you sure, well, if you didn't sit tight, I never come off. I'd sit there, but I'd put my arms round his neck. I knew, but half of them fell off. And the sergeant major shouted, "Who the hell told you to dismount?"
The biggest challenge for the civilian volunteers was army discipline. The training sergeants could be brutal in their demand for absolute obedience to authority. Humiliation was one of their weapons.
This particular sergeant, he got a nasty wagging tongue, and he used to call us all you flippin' little mother's boys and all that sort of talk, you know what I mean? And they always said they got one for him ready. They got a bullet ready for him any time that they get a chance, he'll have one up the spout. And that was quite true too. I believe they would, in a sense. Some of them, they so disliked this one particular sergeant.
Sometimes the humiliation proved too much for young men like George Littlefair, a farm labourer before joining up.
There was one little bugger, wax stash, turned up, and yapping and shouting. You're not only your mother's aprons now, and all that bloody tittle-tattle. And he used to call me Liquorfair, because he was short too, and he couldn't get Littlefair. And I was in one of them good humours. I never answered him. I never. And so he come up, and Timmer, he looked at him. Who the hell do you think you are? And I just stood. He said, I think you're a bastard. Ooh, as soon as he said that, I hit him in the mouth with that. No, I said, don't prove it.
The incident was overlooked after it was discovered George Littlefair's mother had recently died. Norman Collins from Hartlepool